My name is Fazlun Khalid, and I'm the founder and director of an organization called the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, and we are based in Birmingham in the UK. There is a tremendous urgency in this situation, and there are lots of responses, including the Pope's encyclical, which came out in June, and the Islamic community, as far as I'm aware, has not responded with the required alacrity to the dangers of our times. Given the position that I hold, in the sense that I work with Islamic and Muslim environmentalists, and I have done this for the past 30-40 years, and in consultation with colleagues, I was able to put together a very strong group of people representing the Islamic and environmental tradition, both as academic scholars working in the secular world, somebody who has, or people who have an understanding of the Islamic position as well, and not only thinkers in this field, but also activists who are trying to change reality on the ground in the interests of moving the Islamic position forward in this. We've taken the initiative in the hope that this would generate activism, would generate further thinking, further writing, and we don't even mind if it generates further negative conversation, because the negative conversation will allow us to engage with people and to explain the situation. So we welcome all views. Well, I mean, when I began to put the first draft together, I had 4 objectives in mind. And the first of these was, in fact, to sensitize the Paris process with the Islamic view, and to join and to get them to feel that the Muslims are also talking about this, and Muslims are also demanding change. The second objective has been, like I said earlier on, has been to, for this document to be like an aid memoir for the delegates from Muslim countries, which number nearly 60. So it'll help them in a very summarized form to look at both at what is going on in the world out there and what the Islamic teachings are. The third point is that this would act as a kind of a educational resource for the Muslims themselves. And I see an abbreviated form of this 8-page document hanging in every mosque wall in every corner of the earth as a process of education. And fourthly, I also see this as expressing solidarity with other faith groups and other non-faith groups, with all, whether we are faith or non-faith, we are all part of the same world, in giving them a sense that we are part of that process, you see, and that's been the thinking behind this, and I think it's worked well. In order to make it available to every Muslim everywhere, we need to translate it into a series of languages. And some people have said United Nations languages, there are 7 of them. It's fine, that's a good start, and we need to move into other languages as well. You know, like for example, Swahili is not an United Nations language, but a large part of the east coast of Africa, people use Swahili. So I have in mind, my mind's eye, about 12 languages, and these should be translated. And an active education process. I think we need to talk to the scholarly community and try to tell them scholarship is of not much use if it's not applicable in the real world. You can quote me on that, I don't mind, because they need to be woken up as well. Now, I had 2 bits of good news today. One is that you were at the press conference, you probably heard the head of the Congress of Scholars in Indonesia saying, we take it on board. See, if he has taken it on board, the world's most populous Islamic country, and then he is going to say to his people and the constituent organizations of that Congress to say, take this on. And that will then continue with the next category, all the Quran schools and all the schools that teach this thing. So the cascade effect is already working. And we hope that this will be emulated. Now I hear that the Muslim Council of Britain in the UK have already accepted this document, you see, which is a good thing. Now they have influence in the mosques and the Quran schools in the UK, and they can, if they don't, we will encourage them to pass the message on. You see, fundamentally, where we've got this wrong, what I call the capitalist model has got it wrong, is that the earth is finite. The earth doesn't grow, so we cannot grow. And how this whole business that's in our minds that we can grow and grow and grow is a lie, in fact. And at the root of this is the whole process of financial intermediation. There is something quite radically, profoundly wrong with the way we have decided that money can be created out of nothing. The entire banking system, now that since the banking collapse, people are beginning to wake up that money is nothing in the way that the Prime Minister of Britain can say, we are going to print money. They call it quantitative easing, you see. But quantitative easing is not a new process. It's been there all the time, you see. And people need to be educated, you see. But somehow, if something is good and it does us good and gives us a good life and all the things we consume, so it must be all right. Let's leave it alone. But leaving it alone is disastrous in this instance because it's not going to do the planet any good, and the good life you earn will be swamped by climate change. Can I say that? I mean, you're at an Islamic conference on. You see, this is the problem with the secular world. It's immorality. You see, but there are no standards. There are no boundaries. And the lack of boundaries allows everybody to do anything they want, provided they comply with the laws of the land. You can do anything you want. But the fact is, we can't do anything we want because the national burden doesn't allow us to do this in this instance, you see. And the lack of boundaries, we talk about, British values, Western values, this value, but they are to no avail if those values do not give us a bound, that our behavior has to be confined within certain parameters. And the economic system does not allow that. But what it allows for is the infinite creation of wealth. But you can't do that. And I would ask people to have another look at the image of the Earth recently produced by a NASA satellite from 1 million miles away. And you see it, and it has boundaries. There's nowhere else to go, you see. And so we need to protect this home of ours. And if you look at that image of planet Earth and imagine it to be a cake, and we can all say to ourselves, there's only one cake, and we have to share it equally. I can't have the lion's share of it, because if I have the lion's share, others are going to have less. Think of the poor people. So, but this leads me to our argument about sustainable development and all those kinds of issues, you see. But at one and the same time, the United Nations and other people are asking communities to look at sustainable development. They must also look at the World Bank and the IMF and the banking system, which in fact makes the world's 1% even richer. At the time we are beginning to articulate equal shares for all, we find that the riches of the world are being confined to a smaller and smaller minority. So other 99% get the rest, you see. That has to change. That has to change. If people are talking about sustainable development goals, and the poor are going to have more, then the rich have got to have less. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. Otherwise, we are talking double speak, you see. So my question is, who is then saying to the business community, at the same time they're talking the language of sustainability, who is going to say to the business community and the banks that you have to curb your profits? And that is the only kind of parallel language that will meet You see, but profits is about exploitation. Exploitation is about the earth. If you're going to increase your profit, it's got to come from somewhere. It only comes from there. So they're not talking that language. This is why I say I'm a sustainable development skeptic, because if you don't, as an idea, it is great. Then we must all be sustainable. So what about sustainable profits?
Yeah.
You see, we must target the business community, and just saying to them, you've got to reduce your carbon footprint is not enough, because then they will think of other ways of increasing their profits, and profit comes from the environment. I think the faith communities need to act more politically. They need to have a lobbying process, and if we are a joint lobbying force, we'll be a very powerful force and a very powerful voice. I think there is something to be said to act as a concerted lobby group, at the voice of the faith organizations for change, faith for change kind of thing. And that can happen at a national level or at a supranational level. And the idea of inviting people from the non-Muslim world here for the past 2 days is a good example of where the Muslims are showing solidarity with the other faiths and other groups to act as one voice in saving this planet for the future. I think there is a certain legitimacy in that, and people need to work on it. For example, last year I was invited to New York the week prior to Ban Ki-moon's conference on climate change in the United Nations. The Union's Theological Seminary had a global interfaith meeting. So there is a movement. There is a movement. It needs to solidify. You see.
It's getting organized.
Yes, getting organized. Yeah, yeah.